There it says, wherefore gird up your loins and serve God in fear and truth, forsaking the vain and empty talking and the error of the many, for that ye have believed on him that raised our Lord Jesus from the dead, and gave unto him glory, and a throne at his right hand, unto whom all things were made subject that are in heaven and that are on earth, and to whom every creature that has breath doeth service, who cometh as judge of quick and dead, whose blood God will require of them that are disobedient to him. What does this sound like? Right, this is very similar to Philippians chapter 2, 9 through 11, is it not? Look, right after Philippians talks about him, being in the form of a God, taking on the form of a man, right, emptying himself. Although he was rich, he became poor. He became lower than the angels, lower than the gods, Trinitarians. Psalm 8, 5, 6, Hebrews 2, 7 through 9, last Adam, 1 Corinthians 15, 45. Trinitarians, it's time to align yourselves with the Bible, okay? And as we go through these early Christian views of Jesus, you align yourselves with them too. That's okay. It's better than where you are right now, as we're going to demonstrate. Although I don't want you Trinitarians to lose your faith. It's very important, because even though I think it's false doctrine, I understand the difficulties that are involved at times with growing up a certain way, or being around certain people, or having really put a lot of effort and time and spirit into becoming a Trinitarian. So it's really up to you, but your doctrine is not in these writers, these early Christian writers. It's not in the Bible. We've shown that, right? You guys act like it's all over the place. It's like it's in the Old Testament, it's in the New Testament. It's not anywhere. One God the Father, that's what's there, right? Sons of God are gods, that's what's there. Then when we look, and we have a whole series going on that, okay? So I'm not just saying that, as we know. Now we're going through these early Christian writers, Trinitarians, and we're seeing the same things that we believe and that we get, of course, directly from the Bible, but that we also can now see well into the 2nd century are consistent with what we've been telling you. Here, look, right after Philippians 2, 6 through 9 talks about him taking the form of a man, as I explained. Talks about him giving his life, right, and then being raised up. And as I told Dr. White during our debate, which he completely avoided by trying to claim I split Jesus up in 2 persons, right? I brought up Philippians 2, 6 through 11. I said, well, who's being exalted here? You say he has 2 natures, and he's always been God, right? He's never ceased being God, in total contradiction of the text I just referenced earlier. So how is he being exalted? He's already God, right? You can't be exalted to, and remember, this is an exaltation like praise, and this is being elevated to a position, a superior position he wasn't in. Hence, he's being elevated. Well, if he's already God and never stopped being God, and according to Dr. White during our debate, you can't split up the natures. It's one person. One person, right, James? Okay, one person. So he's being exalted as one person. But if he was already God as one person, why would he have to be exalted to a superior position? That's what I tried to explain to him, and I've been explaining ever since. And I'll continue to explain, because it makes no sense, Trinitarians. You are the ones who split up his natures, because you're ultimately forced to conclude that it's his human nature being elevated there. Just like you're forced to conclude it's his human nature being given all authority. Matthew 28. But you don't want to conclude that in Philippians 2, because he's given the name above every name, right? And you like to parallel the not quotation, but use of similar language from Isaiah, and say it's basically calling him Jehovah there. But it's actually doing exactly the opposite, right? It's proving he's not Jehovah by first referring to Jehovah as the one who exalted him to a position that is one person. He was not in before. You can't split up the natures, James. One person, God already to you, not to us, because he's been made lower than the angels. Hebrews 2. Last Adam, 1 Corinthians 15. So to us, it's easy. He's been made a life-giving spirit and exalted to God's right hand. Simple, done. Son of God, given all the authority in heaven and on earth, sitting on God's throne. Christians get that too, rule from heaven on God's throne. Revelation 3. So, he was not God always. He couldn't have been, because there would have then been no need to exalt him to a superior position. Doesn't get any higher than that, Dr. White. All due respect, you're ignoring the point like you did last time. And there really is no way to address the point. You said it yourself. He's one person. So as one person, he's being exalted to a position he didn't have before. And if he was already God, he would already be in that position, both natures and all. You're the one who has to split him up to account for him receiving something that's inconsistent with what you say he already had, which would then be inconsistent with what Paul says he didn't already have, and which is consistent with Polycarp right here, which again says God raised him from the dead and gave him glory. And as we know in Philippians 2, right, Jesus talks about receiving the glory that he had with the Father before the world was, just like John 1:1 describes, in heaven, just like wisdom itself describes, Proverbs 8:11 through 35, consistent with Micah 5:1 through 4, which uses the same term referring to the goings forth or activity of the pre-human Messiah. So we can account for all of our beliefs biblically, and the receiving of glory shows he didn't have that glory before, Trinitarians. You say he always had it. He just veiled it. This doesn't say he unveiled it. It says he gave him glory, Trinitarians. That means he didn't have it. You see, giving something, that means they didn't have it. Uncovering something, yes, okay, that means unveiling. That's not what it says. So, again, this is being raised to a spirit in heaven. I'm going to show you, we'll talk more about that in a moment. But that's the glory he's receiving, and the throne at his right hand, consistent again with everything we read in the biblical text. All these things were made subject to him because they weren't subject to him already. He wasn't God already. He gave up being a God or being in the form of God, like the other sons of God, to become a man, lower than those gods, those angels, and of course God. So your doctrine is refuted all over the place. It's not scriptural. It's a tradition you try to bring from out of place into these texts and even into these early writers and say, which is Trinity? No Trinity. One God the Father. Sons of God are gods who either represent their Father or who become their own gods, like Satan.